Yes, the autumn wind is a raider, and the gusts of change have blown across the deserts of Las Vegas once again, bringing about a championship pedigree throughout the offices and the facility and the franchise of the Las Vegas Raiders. A Super Bowl winning GM, John Spytek, in. A Super Bowl winning head coach, Pete Carroll, in. And now we get set for their first draft as they look to build a champion in Las Vegas. Welcome, everybody. We're back. So great to be back here with you on the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast alongside the former NFL scout, the former Raider, Bucky Brooks. I am Rhett Lewis from NFL Network. So excited to get to join this journey with you once again. The path to the draft is littered with obstacles and pitfalls, but also with triumph, with success stories, and we are here for all of it, my friend. It is draft season once again, Buck, and excited to be back here with you, man.
Yeah, Rhett, really excited. And it's funny, you talk about the accolades that the general manager and the head coach come with. Talk about Spytek being a Super Bowl champion, Pete Carroll not only winning Super Bowl, but also winning national titles. And it just makes me go back to some of the ethos that the Raiders have always talked about, whether it's commitment to excellence, whether it's just win, baby, that the late Al Davis used to talk about. I think the organizational philosophy dovetails with what Pete Carroll believes in. For the longest time when he was at SC, it was like win forever. Competition is a big part of who he is and what he's about. And I'll say this, for the first time in a long time, the philosophy of the head coach perfectly matches the philosophy of the organization. I'm really excited to see how this marriage kind of works out, because all of the things that you look at on paper align, and that typically leads to a lot of success.
No question. And yeah, as you mentioned, you look back throughout, the career arcs of both of these main players now for the Raiders, and you see that success, and that I think that's that's something that we're going to dig in on here, and we're going to compete. We're going to compete to be better for you here in year 3 than we were in year 2 and year 1. In each episode, we're going to try to build that competitive nature. And like in this episode, I think it's a great opportunity to familiarize ourselves with the past and with what has worked in the past for John Spytek, for Pete Carroll, for this Raiders organization. And, not to say that the past always wins, but it does paint a picture of future success. And that's what we'll try to do here in this edition of the podcast. Also, we both spent time at the marquee All-Star games, as All-Star season is kind of come and gone. There's one big piece of All-Star season left, and I know you'll be a big part of the February HBCU Legacy Bowl, which will come a little bit closer to Combine time, and we'll get we'll get into that when that time comes. But we're going to dive into our major takeaways and biggest players, biggest winners, who made money from the Senior Bowl in Mobile, from the East-West Shrine Bowl in Arlington, Texas, 100th edition. Bucky was on the mic for. Excited for that one, my friend. So we're going to get through that, and then we'll probably leave you with just a little bit of a teaser as to what the headlines of this draft and this draft class are going to be. So all that coming up here for you in the season premiere of the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. Let's dig in, though. Let's dig in with where Mark Davis has gone with this iteration of the Raiders and how he tries to build this franchise back to a consistent winner, to getting to the top of the mountain. And again, these two main players, General Manager John Spytek, Head Coach Pete Carroll, have been there. Let's start with John Spytek here, leading the personnel charge, right? Leading the talent evaluation front, and that's what so much of the next few months are going to be about. Won a Super Bowl in Tampa with the Bucs, with Tom Brady as the quarterback. But I think if we just chalk it up to the fact that the GOAT was there, I think you're doing a disservice to the work that he and Jason Light and that entire Tampa Bay Bucs front office did to build a champion around Tom. And what it had kind of been building, and then you're able to drop the quarterback in and find a winner. And to me, the biggest thing that sticks out are the trenches. That was a franchise when John was there and evaluating and hitting constantly on offensive line and defensive line studs. Tristan Wirfs stands out above the rest, right? Absolute dog at left tackle. And he wasn't even the first tackle off the board that year. Remember, he was a rookie when they won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. And we'll start there, and then we can get into the defensive side of the ball. But they've remade that offensive line now a couple of times in Tampa. Think about Ali Marpet, Ryan Jensen. You think about Alex Kappa, were all Tampa Bay draft picks, all went on. Marpet played his entire career in Tampa. You had Alex Kappa go get a
Mm-hmm.
big free agency deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, but then they reloaded, right? They brought in Cody Mauch, who was a starter from day one, who got outside of the first round, second round from North Dakota State. They have found winners on that offensive line. And to me, as you kind of parlay that into where the Raiders are sitting, I'm feeling really good if I'm a Raider Nation fan here sitting, knowing the pedigree of where John Spytek and his emphasis with the talent evaluation is coming from.
Yeah, when you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the way that they were constructed to be a Super Bowl champion, it was about the trenches. And you look at the players that they typically acquired at the first round, it was always offensive, defensive linemen. And some of that is a deeply rooted philosophy in some members of their front office that have come from other places that believe that you build the trenches first and then you worry about the other stuff. And when you invest in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line, what it does is it's really like building the foundation of your house. It's rock solid at the point of attack, and it allows you to always be, I would say, really good, maybe without having some of the premier players on the perimeter. We saw last year that Tampa Bay team lost Chris Godwin, lost some other playmakers on the outside, but because they were so good up front, offensive and defensive line, they were able to sustain it. On offense, they were able to go from being a pass first team to a running team. And the only way that happens is because your offensive line is able to dominate. When we look at the issues that the Raiders have had, particularly last year, unable to run the ball. And a lot of people will try and point to Josh Jacobs and his departure going to Green Bay as a free agent. But really, when you dig deeper and you kind of get up under the hood, you see that offensively they couldn't push people at the line of scrimmage. And if you can't control the line of scrimmage, look, no chance to consistently run the football. And in this league, as it's cyclical in nature, you have to be able to run the ball to deal with some of the top teams in the AFC.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, we look at some of the best offensive lines around the league, and most of them are homegrown.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them have been almost completely filled out with draft picks. And I go back to what the Bucks did, and they got Graham Barton in the first round, plug and play center, Luke Gedeke, right tackle, Tristan Wirfs, left tackle. You kind of go Cody Mauch at guard. Like, they are finding guys that are going to be with them for the long haul, right? And you get them on those good rookie deals. And, then like you feel better about paying a Tristan Wirfs a market setting deal when you go forward past that rookie deal because of the work that you've done with them, the investment you've made in them. I look at the defensive side of the ball on that front too. Kalijah Kancey,
Mm-hmm.
Yaya Diaby, Logan Hall, bang, bang, bang. It just like they have found ways on that Tampa Bay Bucks front to get impact players and to find players even beyond. Right, the rotational players that come in have also been, for the most part, homegrown. And you got to hit beyond the first round. You look at what the Bucks did just this last year. Bucky Irving, major hit. Jalen McMillan might be one of the best receivers, outside of the Malik Neighbors, tier in this entire draft class. So like I love, if I'm a Raider fan, I love that part of what John Spytek brings to this evaluation front. It's all right. We're going to hit these first round picks, but we're going to find starters down the road in the draft, day 2, even into day 3. Like we're talking about Bucky Irving at a phenomenal 4th round pick, phenomenal rookie season, pairing up with Rashad White and building that run game that way. So that's the other part of it. It's, a commitment to the trenches. And you look through, John's history of the draft with Jason Light, and it's, they're always going D-line, O-line somewhere, right? You're always continuing to fortify. And then you're hitting on guys beyond the first round. And I think that's what paints a successful model for consistent success in the NFL.
Yeah, consistent success, but it goes beyond the front office being committed to identifying and developing those late round picks, those undrafted free agents. This is where the marriage between John Spytek and Pete Carroll can really help this team go to the next level. If you go back and you look at the way the Seattle Seahawks became a dominant team in the NFC, particularly in the early 2010s, man, it was about embracing competition and the best players play. And when you create that kind of environment where you're saying the best players play, regardless of pedigree, regardless of draft status, everyone has a shot and an opportunity. Whether that's an undrafted free agent, whether that is a top pick, everyone comes in the building and they're all viewed the same. For Pete Carroll, who has a commitment to playing young players, that allows
Yeah.
the front office to go and say, hey, this is a fifth and sixth round pick that has developmental potential. We have to give him an opportunity to develop. The coaches have to then take that player and give him every opportunity to get on the field and to do his thing once he earns it. And so it very much is, hey, the coaches have to play the young players after the front office identifies which young players have the potential to be key contributors.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, when you bring Pete into the conversation, obviously, you look at the Seattle Seahawks success. Surely you look at beast mode, a former Raider as well. But then, the immediacy of what you see is the Legion of Boom. You see that defense, right? And so many of those guys, with the exception of Earl Thomas, came beyond the first round as well, right? Richard Sherman was what, a fifth round pick out of Stanford, a converted wide receiver. You look at
Cam Chancellor,
length.
yeah.
Cam Chancellor, indeed. You look at length and physicality in the secondary. And, I'd love to get your take on this because I know you're familiar with Pete and how the emphasis that he puts on some of those traits, right, from a defensive standpoint. What does that do for you? Why was that important in building a winner in Seattle? And then how would you kind of relate that to what that might look like for the Raiders moving forward on the defensive side?
Well, going all the way back to when Mr. Davis was in the building and what he wanted from his teams.
Yeah.
He always wanted a big, strong, fast, physical football team that could control the line of scrimmage in the middle of the field. Pete Carroll comes from the same ilk. He wants to have a team that is big, fast, and physical. He is one that prefers instincts over other things because he wants his guys to play fast. And so a lot of what Pete Carroll has done is let's simplify so we can allow our guys to overwhelm them with their sheer athleticism and talent. The reason why it works and why it will work with the Raiders is because if you're bringing in developmental players who have prototypical traits and you have a coach who wants to make sure that we are going to unleash these players who have these traits by keeping it simple and allowing them to play. Part of the development is making sure that you have a simple formula that they can digest and then execute. So you have these plans that are working together to help your young players, your most athletic players, your big, fast, and physical players who are superior to their opponent dominate. It all works because everyone is seeing the game out of the same lens.
I love that. I love the way that and it's like organizational lockstep,
Yes.
right? It's like, okay, GM understands what the coach needs. Coach understands and trusts that the GM is going to do what's best for the roster with that coaching vision in mind, right? And it's a delicate balance, right? I think one of the best quotes I heard, from a head coach talking about the relationship with the GM was, our offices are pretty close to each other, but that carpet in between our offices is worn out. Right. We are going back and forth. We are talking. We are having that line of communication to understand and better understand each other and our views and how they align. Right. And maybe where they differ and then working through those differences. I think, you look at some of the best head coach GM pairings and I think you have that synergy, right? You have that synergy with how they view the game, but how they also view the players that fit the game plan. And so I think that's really important as well. And I think, both parties here, if we're talking about general manager and head coach, understand that both have done it at the highest level and have won at the highest level. And I think, there's trade secrets to be shared there. Like, this is why it worked for us. This is why it worked for us. How can we make it work for the Raiders?
Yeah.
And that's where that relationship really forges that consistent success that we're talking about here.
Yeah, it really forges because there are different paths to get to the promised land. But when you've gone down that path and you've experienced the journey and you've successfully navigated the journey, you have this kindred spirit that exists that you're able to kind of talk about ball in a different level. Because Spytek had an opportunity when he was with the Denver Broncos to see Pete Carroll's vision when the Seattle Seahawks mollywopped him in the
Sure.
Super Bowl, and he saw the big, fast, physical team, and he has a clear understanding of what it was that he faced. He has a better perspective on the type of team that
Sure.
Pete Carroll wants, and that will lead you to bring the right kind of players to do it. And if you listen to the introductory presser, they talk so much
Mm,
about character and getting the person right and those things. Old
got to.
school traits that are I would call business principles. Jim Collins talks about good to great. Before you do anything, you got to get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. The Raiders are now committed to getting the right people on the bus, and then they'll figure out what to do once they have the right crew that they're rolling with from a schematic standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on there. Okay, so that's just a little look and a little bit of an understanding of the background and what it might take for those backgrounds to come together and find that success for the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay. Second piece of the pod today is a look at All-Star game season
Mhm.
because it is such an important evaluation tool. You talk about the crown jewels, right? The triple crown, right? You've got the
Mhm.
All-Star games, you've got the combine, you've got pro days, and obviously you've got the college tape as well, which is the biggest piece from where these college players have come from, and then as they make the transition to NFL prospect, that's where you talk about those three big ones, right?
Mhm.
And we've basically wrapped up the bulk of All Star game season. Buck, you got a chance to be down there with Mike Yam, with Jane Slater, with Isaiah Standback on the call for the 100th East West Shrine Bowl. Both you and I have
Mhm.
shared a couple of times as well. Always a great opportunity to see guys elevate and to see the competition that they have within themselves to stand above the rest. I'm curious as it relates back to, if we're setting the Raiders draft needs. I mean, I think you can never go wrong O-line, D-line.
Mhm.
I think continuing to fortify that front. Obviously, we'll get into the quarterback stuff here. That's got to be solved. But I think that there's kind of a blank slate to go find great players here, and I think that's ultimately what draft number one has really got to be about, to set the tone. And so as we look at these all-star players that we've seen, Buck, and that you saw down at the East-West game, anything that stands out to you in terms of player standouts that might jive with where the Raiders are looking?
Yeah, now there are a few guys that certainly should be on the radar for the Raiders. I think it's important that we talk about the quarterbacks first and foremost,
Yep.
because the East West Shrine Bowl was where Shador Sanders elected to go and do his All Star bidding. He didn't play in the game, but that is where he sat down and interviewed with a few different teams. He talked about it. He was around, and you got a general sense of who he was as a player. Now, it's not the same thing that you would have received, that you would have gotten if you got a chance to watch him play, but I can say he's a little different than maybe I initially thought when it comes to
Mm,
his personality, how deep and insightful he is when it comes to really learning the playbook and those things. And by all accounts, his interviews went really, really well. So Shadur Sanders being there, that's someone that we certainly have to talk about, particularly where the Raiders are picking in the top 10. Cal McCord would be the next player that you want to talk about at that position from this game, because Cal McCord has the traits. Cal McCord has the pedigree. He has a guy who has a lot of experience. And so if you're the Raiders and you're thinking about a bargain basement option, you're thinking about someone within the top 100, whether it's not a first or
yeah.
not even, maybe not like a second round, but a top of the third round pick, Cal McCord could be in play, because watching his growth from Ohio State to Syracuse, where he lit it up,
Huge
huge numbers.
upgrade.
And
Yeah.
it reminds me, it won't be the same, but I'll say this, it reminds me a lot of the way Bo Nix changed after he went from Auburn to Oregon and those things. Cal McCord is someone that you want to keep your eye on, just because he was so stellar his final season at Syracuse, and continued to be a really, really impressive thrower over the course of the week. Some names that I can give you up front, because we talked
Yeah.
about line of scrimmage. When we talk about D
Yeah.
line, I'll give you two. I'll give you Jordan Phillips, big body from
Monster.
Maryland. Man, squatty body, but 318 chisel. Great energy, motor, effort was everything that you look for. Heavy hands. Really did a really good job of controlling the line of scrimmage. And look, he can play three technique. He can play over the nose. He is someone that you're going to want to talk about. He was really, really good for most of the week at the point of attack. You had another player, Antoine Powell Ryland from Virginia Tech,
Mm,
speedy, edge rusher, athletic. And we can sit here and say, hey, Tyree Wilson, Max Crosby, maybe they don't need another. You always need a wave of bodies. You have guys up front, just knowing Pete, he always loves to have these guys. And even though Patrick Graham continues on as the D coordinator, you have to think that they're going to try and sprinkle some of these athletes into that front line to change it. Those guys were really good. If we go to the secondary, Kansas, Kobe Bryant, really impressive
oh,
in practice.
another Kobe
Another
Bryant
Kobe
in the
Bryant. I
house.
mean,
Let's
who
go.
knew? Who knew that there were so many Kobe's in the world?
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant was really impressive. Instincts, awareness. I'm gonna tell you, if he was 195 pounds, we'd be talking about him at the top of the charts. Because he's a little
Wow.
slender, 175, and those things. He may be a guy that's available third, fourth, just because of that. But he was really impressive. And then Ahage Huzzy from North Carolina, he was pretty impressive.
Tar Heel.
I mean, I can't say anything. I'd be more excited about the Tar Heels
Let's
after a
go.
year with Bill Belichick, but he was in the mix. He was pretty impressive. Couldn't finish the practice week, but
Yeah.
man, he flashed. So there were some good players there. A lot of intriguing names, and I can't go without talking about a running back, Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. Fire hydrant, 5'9", 235 pounds. You expect him to play one way, but he plays differently.
Love
He has
that.
the ability to do dirty work, but he also had that stop-start quickness and burst that you look for. He had a really, really good week down in Dallas.
Some good ones, some good names, and definitely some positions where you could see those types of players fitting in with the Las Vegas Raiders. So just a moment on the Senior Bowl now, but this was unlike anything I've ever seen.
Ooh.
The way the game ended, it was the most emotional ending I've ever seen in a game that I've been a part of, much less an all-star game where the game atmosphere can feel often kind of sterile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because no one really cares who wins. It's about how the players played and performed. But that was not the case with the American team in the Senior Bowl. Jack Besh, who most either have known or will go find out now, his brother Tiger Besh was a player at Princeton, a running back. His older brother Tiger was killed in the New Orleans terrorist attacks on New Year's Day down on Bourbon Street. And Jack was already committed to play the Senior Bowl, stayed committed, wanted to still play, wanted to play for his brother. The Senior Bowl put Tiger's number 7. He wore number 7 at Princeton. They put that decal on the helmet of every player at the Senior Bowl to honor him. Jack himself changed his jersey number from his customary 18 to number 7 to play for his brother, and had a phenomenal week. Let's start there. Like, the dude can play. Like, he is a contested catch machine. He's got great catch radius, big, physical, like, attacks the football with his hands. Like, it's a 75-25 ball, not a 50-50 ball. Every ball that's up in the air, like, he's got the mindset it's his. It's not like, oh, it's not a battle. It is mine. He's got a good sense for understanding routes, understanding how to get open. Showcased it all week. Was one of the best. Was the practice player of the week from his wide receiver group on his team. And then we get to the game, and he's making big catches again. I think he was the leading receiver going into the final drive where the American team was down and they wanted a touchdown to win it. Right. And so they get in a 2-minute situation. Great situational football, right? To evaluate some of these players. And they're going down, and he's made a couple catches. And then we get down. It's 4th and goal from inside the 5-yard line. 4th and goal. Going for the win. Seth Hennigan from Memphis rolling out. Well, you got Jack Besh screaming across the goal line from the left side of the formation to the right. Hennigan evades pressure, makes a great play in his own right, gets it off to Besh, makes a physical, tough catch, falling down into the end zone. Game winner. Walk-off winner in the Senior Bowl.
Love it.
Bucky. 7 seconds left. Jack Besh wearing number 7, catching a pass from Memphis Tiger quarterback Seth Hennigan. Like, if that ain't seventh heaven, if that ain't divine intervention,
look at you.
Man, I don't know what.
Look at you. That's a broadcaster's dream, to be able to do the storybook, to tie it up, put a bow on it. It was a great story that punctuated what everyone talks about, a great week. They talked about the number of players that were down there, and so that story was fantastic. Put a nice perfect bow on a
Yeah,
week
great bow
where,
on it.
and look, and we
Yeah.
know, like people talk about the Senior Bowl, and the Senior Bowl is where the top dudes are. The Raiders and company spent a lot of time looking at some very talented prospects that were
Oh
in the
yeah.
building. Jackson Dart got a little love, got a lot of
Yep.
love over the course of the week. So there were some interesting players that I heard about
Oh
and read
yeah.
about.
Well, look, the Raiders sitting here at sixth overall. There's a very real possibility that they get shut out of
Mhm.
the Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, market if they do stay at six, right? And if those two go in the first five picks, which is possible, I don't know that
Mhm.
that's going to happen. Might have an opportunity at QB2, but Jackson Dart is firmly in the QB3
Yeah.
conversation, and so is Jalen Milrow. I'm going to be honest with you. Another guy down there, Tyler Shuck might enter his name
Oh,
into the
Tyler. Yeah,
QB3
I know
conversation
Tyler. Yeah.
from Louisville, 7 years in college football, started at Oregon, played at Texas Tech, and then finished up with the Brahms at Louisville. Big physical prospect who's got a big arm, great head on his shoulders, seen a lot of offense, seen a lot of football. You love that type of experience, right? Because we know that has been a trend in the league. That stuff plays now. So that from the quarterback perspective there. Also, Dylan Gabriel had a good week for himself.
Mhm.
And I bring that up to mention this. There's only been two quarterbacks in at least the last 30 years, Bucky, that have gone through college football and have thrown for more than 3,000 yards and more than 30 passing touchdowns at more than one college destination. Dylan Gabriel is one of them.
Mm.
UCF, Oklahoma, and lastly at Oregon. Do you know who the other quarterback was?
Mm. Who was that?
Russell Wilson.
Oh, wow.
Do you know how tall Russell Wilson is?
Oh, 5.
5'10".
Yeah.
You know how tall Dylan Gabriel is?
Uh-oh. Got a
5'104".
lot of parallels. 5104
Well,
is
Gabriel launches it with the left, a little bit different there, and he's not nearly as thick as Russell Wilson is. Although Russ didn't necessarily come in that way. He built that up, right? But Dylan Gabriel has got something to him. He's got skills there, and I think that's a late day 2, early day 3 type of situation there that could be intriguing. Up front, I think you're going to be talking about Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. They were 1 and 2 in FBS and sacks this year, and they were really good in the one-on-ones. I felt like the O-line and D-line did steal the show
Mhm.
for the most part. I think if you're looking on the offensive line, the name to know to begin with is Gray Zabel from North Dakota State.
Mhm.
Told you that John Spytek and that crew at Tampa found Cody Malk out of North Dakota State and has been an instant impact player. Gray Zabel is that as well. Whether that, you keep, Jackson Powers Johnson, whether he goes to center, Zabel can play center. He can play either of the guard spots. He might be able to get you out of a tackle spot too. Like, I think that is an extremely versatile player that held up and acquitted himself very well against guys like Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, who's going to be one of the
Mhm.
best, defensive linemen in this thing. Joshua Farmer from Florida State was excellent, big, powerful dude with a ton of strength. Shamar Stewart from Texas
Yeah.
A&M was a big time player in this game. Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss will be another one to watch. A little bit slighter frame, maybe kind of reminds me a little bit more of like a Malcolm Kuntz who
Okay.
comes back this year for the Raiders
Mhm.
after the injury, which obviously was a big
Yeah.
loss. And so he comes back, I think is a big deal. I think Jack Besh, as I mentioned, I didn't just mention that story. I think he gives the Raiders something they really don't have at the wide receiver spot. A big physical contested catch type of power forward dude. As we talk about building out a wide receiver group like a basketball team, I think that really fits there too. And then, I think, if you're looking at running back depth, there's definitely some guys to talk about there. Trevor Etienne, Travis Etienne's little brother. Marcus Yarns from Delaware was an interesting one, was probably the fastest dude out there. I mean, we could go down the line. There's a ton of guys that certainly fit, I think, what the Raiders could be looking for. One other one that I'll leave you with on the defensive backfield, because we talked about the type of player that a Pete Carroll coached, defense sometimes likes to look at. Darian Porter from Iowa State.
Mm.
I think he had a little bit of a rocky week, up and down. Dude, 6'4", 200 pounds. He's blocked 5 kicks in his career.
Wow. Wow.
5 kicks in his career. So now you've got special teams added value there. And then you've got that length, that traitsy type of player, maybe a little bit further down the road in the draft because he's raw. He started at wide receiver at Ohio State, then current. Where did we hear that before in Pete Carroll's lineage?
Yeah.
So,
He has a history of doing that. We think about the work that he
yeah.
did with Richard Sherman, who had already kind of made that
Sure.
conversion under Harbaugh, but continued
Yeah.
to develop under Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
The thing that I love hearing is the versatility, the multiplicity when it comes to the
Yeah.
positions and what guys are able to do. All those things matter when it comes time to kind of separating where they should stack on the board. Man, the more you can do is a separating factor in some of these
Yeah.
debates.
No question. And it's always something we watch as we get into, day 2, day 3, especially in even the priority free agent market, where you could still find some really good players. So, look, this is just the opening salvo. We got a lot more on the way. We're going to be with you throughout the combine. We'll be with you through pro days. We'll be with you through prospect rankings, mock draft scenarios. We're going to have it all for you. And if you haven't figured it out now, this is not the draft where we're going to have 6 quarterbacks go in the first 12 picks like
Mm-mm.
we did a year ago. And then the Raiders maybe get the player of the draft at 13, like they did last year, Brock Bowers. I'm certainly excited to see what Brock does. But this is a big man draft.
Mhm.
This is, you might see 60 linemen go in the first 12 picks. You might see, you might see 8 to 10 O-line, D linemen go in the first 12 picks. That's the way that this is kind of trending. So we'll see where the Raiders fit as we kind of go forward and continue to take a look at all this. But we will have a deep dive into the quarterbacks for you coming up in our next episode. Be sure to bookmark that. If you're not already, download, subscribe, rate, review. We appreciate you wherever you're watching, whether that's Raiders.com, the Raiders app, or wherever you get your podcasts. So for Bucky Brooks, I am Rhett Lewis. Thanks again for being with us on this season premiere. A lot more great Raiders draft content coming your way right here on the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast.